right, good evening. Welcome to Tux TV. I have a guest this evening, Ultimated Judo Christian. He was I saw him last week on Judeo Christian on Bree's channel, and I wanted to follow up with something that I had a question on, and so I invited him on, and he kindly accepted. And Ultimated, did you by chance set up your channel to simultaneously stream as well?
No, I have
reasons
for that. I will be uploading this to my channel later on,
Very good.
I'd rather not stream it. You can stream it on your side live.
Yeah, I only stream, well, maybe not only, but 90 something percent of what I do is stream. So I was just going to give you just a couple of minutes to tell us about yourself, what your focus of your channel is, and then I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions, and then we'll have some personal talk, and that's pretty much it. It's not much, but it's from the heart.
Okay, this is YouTuber Ultimated Judeo Christian. My YouTube.com channel name is titled Ultimated Judeo Christian, where I primarily talk / debate on Judeo Christian / biblical presuppositionalism. I'm here to talk with Tux TV. I'm assuming it's on proving Judeo Christian presuppositionalism. So we are having a debate, correct?
Sorry, Judeo-Christian just lost. We just lost. That is correct. Maybe not necessarily a debate. I focused a little bit more on a conversation. Find out more exactly what presuppositional is. And hi. There you are. Welcome back. Welcome back, Ultimated.
Yeah, I got a connection issue. I think it's this website, as I've stated previously.
This is why we never have nice things. So I more of a conversation, less debate. I just kind of want to ask you a couple of questions and follow up on something you said about 3 times. But I'll let you, if you have a prepared statement. It's not necessarily a debate, but more of a conversation, if that's all right.
Well, somewhat. I assume that this will be a debate followed by questions.
I don't. Well, continue on with your, if you want to do it a debate style. I haven't prepared any kind of slides or anything like that, or any kind of PowerPoint necessarily. Basically something that you said right at the beginning, and then you doubled down on it later in the show, and then you said it like 10 minutes after that about
what did I double down on?
It's here, I'll just play the clip. How about that? This is off your channel from Bree's cast.
A loving God would use a young earth model as opposed to evolution of millions / billions of years. So that's my main argument for it.
So your main argument was that you have a loving God, and that loving God can only do things in a matter of a certain amount of time, right? So could you explain that to me? I guess a loving God couldn't do it billions of years, but he definitely could do it thousands of years.
I'm saying that God could use an old earth model, but because he is personal, he would use a young earth model.
So he's not restricted to time.
He's not restricted to time. Okay.
Yeah, I assume that this was about presuppositionalism, more precisely proving biblical presuppositionalism.
Right.
Not so much young earth creationism.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess I misunderstood it. I felt it was just going to be me conversing about that this looks more like a deception than it does look like a God did it, and human beings wrote a story about a God doing it, and that you've presupposed that there's a God that did it, and that we would just kind of have a conversation, at least from the email exchange. Maybe I didn't make it clear. So
we can debate young earth creationism now.
No. I'm not referring to young earth creationism. I'm referring to the statement of time. What does it mean in God's time? What does it mean in your time related to that? Like, for instance, if time means something, and when God says time means something, then for instance, I've got this question so Jesus is saying, truly I say to you, this generation shall not pass until all these things have taken place. So Jesus is expecting things to return. His whoever's writing the Bible is claiming that Jesus is going to return in this generation. Paul thinks that Jesus is going to turn any minute. He's like, don't go and get married. Don't go and have kids. Jesus is going to be back any minute. So in Matthew 24:34, he says this, Luke 21:32, and Mark 13:30. Now, if timing,
we don't know how long what the period he is referring to.
But if you can justify that billions of years versus thousands of years, my question is quite simply, what does Jesus say, and is it cruel? Because you basically use the argument that it's cruel for it to be billions of years, but it's somehow not cruel that tells of a generation not passing away. Oh, you left again.
I usually don't get this on StreamYard.
I don't have a subscription to StreamYard, so
it doesn't cost money to sign up to StreamYard.
Yeah, but the terrorists win when a watermark is on a stream. You didn't know that?
I don't know if they have watermarks.
Yeah, they put a StreamYard. If you don't subscribe, then they put a StreamYard watermark.
Okay.
Yeah, they put a
I'll just I don't know if you heard what I said. A generation, we don't know what the period of what a generation is to at that chapter and verse.
Yeah. Okay. Well, is it cruel for Jesus to tell his apostles that he's going to be back during that certain amount of time and then doesn't return during that amount of time?
Well, we don't know how long he was referring to.
If God has the ability, for instance, the clarity and gravitas that we're looking for here, would that be, or should be, if the claim is made that the timing of anything that God does, should he follow through on what he says? And is the timing of it, in reference to what God says versus what humans think, any clarity or gravitas to help make it not cruel? For
What does
instance,
gravitas mean?
It's a form of gravity, the weight of God's. It's a reference to the weight of God's word, for instance, or statement.
Okay, what was your question again?
Gravitas, dignity, seriousness, or solemn of manner. So if God says something, if Jesus says something, and you say, well, we don't know what that means, if the clarity and gravitas of what was said is not comprehended by those that understood it, what good is it for God to say it? How about that?
Well, this is when Jesus was a finite Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
So this wouldn't have been Jesus in his father form. So that's that the gravitas doesn't apply to that chapter and verse.
So you're let me understand this. You don't think that Jesus prior to resurrection was God?
Yes, but the statement of gravitas would be in regards to God's almighty form to have that amount of authoritative weight to what he states.
Mm-hmm. So you are of the belief that there is a God, and Jesus
It's not
is,
a belief; it's an ultimate fact.
So how would you define that as an ultimate fact? Where should I go to see that it's an ultimate fact? I am blind, help me see.
By definition, God is an ultimate fact, as an ultimate fact would just be a definition to God. Backing his prescriptive law of identity, that A is A, and Exodus 3:14 in the Bible, when he states, I am who I am. So to further substantiate on this, God is absolute, eternal, and revelatory. An ultimate fact is identical. Thus, we all know God exists. However, depending on your understanding of the proper noun God, so overall, we know that an ultimate perfect being exists. So that should address your recent response.
Well, you just asked me about 4 or 5 minutes ago what gravitas meant, for instance. And I did a quick Google search and the definition came up and I read it to you. Does God have the equivalency of a Google and a dictionary for that claim that God is an ultimate fact? For me to research it. Okay. What is it?
An ultimate fact.
Can I use what's the equivalent of Google for God? What can I type into to find out the answer directly from God?
We can reference Genesis 1:1.
Okay.
So it goes without being said. Everybody knows God exists, as he is an ultimate fact. In other words, an absolute, eternal, and revelatory fact. So we can't, out of nothing, assert an eternal fact. An eternal absolute fact has to reveal themselves to us, which God has.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming this is going down biblical presuppositionalism now.
Okay.
We sort of steered away from young earth creationism. I don't think there was much of I don't know if we were on young earth creationism. We were more on
No, just the
second
definition of your
coming.
time, or what you defined as time and cruelty to that time, is only ignore the old earth and young earth model. I'm only referring to what in God's time is cruel and uncruel in that statement.
Well, we have to come to the agreement that God exists.
I mean, you saying that it's an ultimate fact just because of Genesis 1:1. If God had written Genesis 1:1 and the entirety of the Bible, I would probably accept the claim that this is a fact. But humans wrote it.
Well, firstly, God sacredly, revealingly authorized the Bible / biblicalism from Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 to Revelation chapter 22, verse 21,
Mm-hmm.
limitedly for his procreated king. But going back, even before reading the Bible, we know that an ultimate perfect being exists.
So if I make the claim that this ultimate being exists in literary form, since it's on pages of paper and once upon a time was on pages of animal skins and once upon a time it was orally committed, in a time in which, say, television didn't exist, so storytelling around the fire as a nighttime activity, and this, progressed to the point where you and I both have our own TV stations. We've seen an evolution of life evolve from things being orally committed to literary committed to stories that we used to have to go to a theater room to go see, and then it was in our households. And when I was a kid, all I could see was about 3 or 4 channels. And now I have my own TV studio with a connectivity to literally millions and millions of different channels, just like mine and yours. Now, to me, Jesus or God, the ultimate fact that you're referring to, doesn't appear to be on any of those stations. There's gentlemen like you, Ultimated, who is ultimately stating as such, but I cannot pop into the God search and, replace the verb Google. I cannot do a Google search and get an answer directly from God.
To address multiple points there, I do like to sort of conclude the earlier point in regards to the generation parts. So in the Bible, I can't remember where it states a day is like 1,000 years to the Lord, and vice versa. So without explicit reference to how long a generation is, you can imply that a day is like 1,000 years to the Lord. And it states that nobody knows the day, the hour when God will return.
It does.
And then to address your recent points, God is an ultimate fact. So are you disagreeing that God is an ultimate fact?
Yes, I am. God is a literary fact.
I have to look up what that means again.
It's a form of writing. So, for instance, I'm going to type in, Here, we'll share this screen right here, and you can just follow along with me.
Oh, he's not an abstract fact.
He's not? All right. Literary.
Without revelation.
What just happened?
So we can't conceptualize without revelation God.
All right.
Because he is eternal.
He's eternal, but keep in mind, if he's eternal and he has the ability to create everything that you've stated he can create, and he has the capability of forming a book from Genesis 1:1 to Revelations 22, from the beginning to the end, he probably would be really good at creating a YouTube channel. And I could type in a super chat for God, ask him clarification, for instance, on what this generation means. If I don't understand something because the translation, the verbal communications, the difference between Hebrew and English, the difference between Greek and English, the differences between Aramaic, Greek, and English, and any of those things that got lost in translation, there's no update here. Right? I'm not using the Google that came out in 1998 when it was go.com. I'm using the version of Google that is available today. You're expecting me to believe that a Google equivalency of God existed sometime in the past, but we still have to use a Google form of the Bible from Genesis 1:1 to Revelations 22. And God is incapable, because he's only around for a second of 1,000 years to us, or vice versa. I may have that backwards. But
before you continue, I'm not saying that you have to believe, because you already know.
I already know what? I already know God is an ultimate fact?
Yes, but not in that exact phrase. You know that an ultimate perfect being exists. So even that phrase, you may not know, or some people may not understand that phrase, but we know innately, without God having to speak to us verbally, that he exists. So that supports premise 1.
Repeat premise 1 for me, because you phrased it in quite a way that what you just said feels like it's a contradiction.
I stated premise 2 earlier, so I'll state premise 1. Biblically / awesomely, God's sacredly revealingly ultimate truthful love to his procreated kin.
You said that?
No, that was premise 1. I stated premise 2.
Oh, okay. Because I think my first question, or maybe not first question, but where we got to here was that you believe there is a God.
I know there is a God. So address premise 1. Otherwise, I can restate it.
You know that there is a God. I don't know that there is a God.
You just reference God with the pronoun I. Because you are a finite being, you have to appeal to God as an ultimate authority, given the category that he is in of being ultimate truthful love. Backing sacred theologies / revealed theologies, i.e., divine, general, and natural revelation of the creator-creature distinction, perfect being theology, God's ultimate / brute factness, and God's prescriptive laws of logic / thought. So God exists by definition. You just have to accept that.
God exists by definition. That definition is literary. All right, let me read you what literary means.
And concretely,
Concretely.
I know what it means. I had to look it up really quick.
So
God is pure actuality.
Pure actuality? God is pure actuality. Pure actuality. All right, what does that mean?
It means
pure actuality.
He is absolute perfection, aka in Latin philosophy, actus purus, as referenced by theologian Thomas Aquinas. So he grounds actuality.
Now,
because he.
Go ahead, finish. Go ahead, finish.
Premise one still remains standing against you.
I don't understand premise one. I'm not even sure what premise one is. I mean, the brute fact, God is a brute fact. Was that premise one?
Yeah, you can say that.
Gur. Thank you, Gur. But by the way, I want to welcome Gur to the channel. I'm very grateful for you to tune in. All insults from the past are forgiven. I mean, hopefully my insults. All right. Ultimated, here's I'm not convinced that there's a God, and I believe you believe that there's a God, right?
I know there is a God.
You know there is a God, all right? I question whether there is a God, but I don't believe it's a brute fact.
God.
I presuppose. God? No, I do not presuppose God. Do you presuppose God, correct?
Yes, as he has revealed himself to us. You're saying the pronoun I. Every time you say I, you have to reference God to understand your creatureliness.
So if I say I was a Christian, that refers to God?
Yes. It's a true dichotomy.
It's a true dichotomy. Perfect. All right. Well, I am an atheist. Does that mean God is in the I as an atheist?
That question is loaded because atheism references God.
Yeah.
You can't escape the true dichotomy. So to further justify this,
the true dichotomy of what?
Of God and not God. Not
God and not God.
Entails
okay. I follow you. I follow you.
So the creator creature distinction truly ontologically is dichotomous, for God definitionally, actually, and abstractly is unsurpassable, uncause ultimate C. Oppositely, deducing him upholding all things and preceding all contingencies.
Yeah.
So because your self-consciousness at a beginning, therefore, God is the necessary cause for your existence. On the contrary, an infinite regression defaultly is completely illogical because a chain of causal effects implies spatial gaps subject to our infinite in size defaultly Judeo-Christian God. So that's a true dichotomy again. So there's no escaping it.
There's no escaping it. See, I'm surrounded. All right. So you're making a brute fact out of a God that is your God. Now, this God has a name. The ultimated is the name of this God, or what do we call this God? Or just I, for instance.
God wouldn't be ultimated. He would be ultimate. This is moving on to premise 2. So
Okay.
if you want to talk about which God exists, that
Sure.
is premise 2.
Actually, that would probably be my next question. Is your God the correct God? Because there's a lot of gods, references. For instance, when I grew up in the church, we were Christian. I never became a true Christian. I rejected the notion when I read the Bible. I decided I was going to get baptized, and I read the Bible, and I didn't think that it was coming from a supernatural being in your premise 1. I also was associated with. I was referring to your God, but in premise 2, I learned of another God named Wakanda. Now, this is a true story. That just because the movie came out roughly 5 years ago, I knew a God named Wakanda, and was taught that God was a god, one of the gods of the Miami tribe of Native American Indians here in the United States, or formerly known as their land. And Wakanda was the name of their great spirit. So which one, the God that is the ultimate, you believe, or the great spirit Wakanda? It's which one of those two are the true God?
The God of the Bible is the one true God. To justify this, firstly, Genesis 1:1 of the Bible has to be stated. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Thus, God definitionally authorized the Bible /biblicalism from Genesis 1:1 to Revelation chapter 22, verse 21 for evidentialism /epistemic foundationalism. So, in other words, only a loving God can exist. And this is referenced within the first sentence of the Bible because creation entails a loving God. God has given us the universe, and he would make this known to us within the first sentence of his sacred book. This is why the Bible is the top-selling book worldwide, and Judeo-Christianity /Christianity is the dominant religion worldwide, because God would make sure of those things. On the contrary, there's no other sacred book that can beat the first sentence of the Bible. So that supports premise 2. You just have to accept the truth.
Okay.
Respond.
So you just made a reference to the best-selling book in the whole wide world is the Bible. Fair enough. Have you ever heard the statement, judging a fish by its ability to climb a tree? Have you ever heard that statement? It's a Mark Twain statement. It's a quote.
Maybe.
So
I'd address the argument.
If I were on YouTube and I have a pittance of 50-some followers, and you have, according to this last refresh, 192 followers, how many would God have?
I'm not following your question.
The question, let me rephrase the question. If God had a YouTube channel, how many subs would he have?
I don't know.
I don't know either, but I bet every single one of us would be. Currently, God has 0 subscribers. The true God, you ultimate brute fact God that you are establishing, that God has 0 subscribers. So there's
what's
0
his YouTube channel then?
It doesn't matter how many Bibles are sold. God has 0 subscribers. The ability for a fish to climb a tree. God has 0 ability to make a YouTube channel and perform any types of clarification or gravitas.
Because God is perfect, he would make sure that the Bible is the top-selling book worldwide. So I'm just adding emphasis to the truthfulness of the Bible. So we can prove the Bible based off the first sentence. It
Okay.
has to be the first sentence to avoid confusion, as God is ultimate truthful love, as stated within premise 1, entailing God to make his attributes known to us within the first sentence of his sacred book. Because of creation. Creation, a creator God, refutes all other false conceptions of physical deities, and creation implies a loving God.
Mm-hmm.
If you take the Quran, for example, the first sentence of it doesn't mention a creation point. So the Quran doesn't complement God's nature, because by reading the first sentence of the Quran, people can imply a physical deity. So this is why a creation point is important to be noted within the first sentence of God's sacred book, the Bible.
Is
God, this
there a
is
better form? I thought you were done.
no. You can.
Is there a better version of the Bible available in today's technology? I guess that's my point with asking the YouTube question.
Your question is not an argument. You're possibly setting up rabbit trails. If you want to ask those sort of questions, just admit to the argument first.
I am accusing God of being incompetent in modern technology. Yes. So that aside, can't God be his own Google? If he's this loving, his ability to carry out the gravitas and clarity that I would need to admit to your premise 1 and 2.
Can you lay out your question in an argument? Because if I answer this question, you may ask more questions for clarity. So if you just lay it out in an argument, then we can just stay on that one point.
Google is better than God. That's my argument.
No, because Google has limited searches. God has absolute knowledge. Therefore, God supersedes Google. And I don't see that as an argument.
Google gives me the opportunity to make my own TV station in which I can invite you on and have a good conversation. Google does that.
God created the material used for technology today. And this goes back to my earlier point.
Mm-hmm.
God gave us the universe out of love for us to sustain our creatureliness up until his return. And the Bible is used as an authority because not everyone defaultly is in the presence of God. Mm-hmm. So we cross-reference facts with the Bible, I would say, as a second authority if you are not in direct communication with God. So you address this first sentence.
I am in direct communication with God, and God appears to be a deceiver unless God performs some variation of a modernization of his own word, some clarification of his own word, and it is provable, testable, repeatable, and in which you can take a selfie with God if you're sitting as you and I are, and he has his camera on, assuming the gender of God is male.
Address Genesis 1:1. That's my argument for proving the Bible. God, out of love, has created the universe. So address that. Thanks.
God out of love. I don't have a response to that. God is in Genesis 1:1 not there. There is no physical presence of God in Genesis 1:1. it's words on a paper.
You agree? Hang on. You agree that God exists? Well, I'm assuming based off us moving from premise 1 to premise 2 that you agree that God exists, correct?
I don't believe your God exists. Whether a creator exists, I'm willing to accept that. I'm an atheist to the Yahweh. I'm an atheist to the Bible, from Genesis 1:1 to Revelations 22:21. That God and that Jesus, Son of God, that Holy Spirit, that Satan, supernatural being set, I am an atheist of.
I will repeat, or I will paraphrase my argument for premise 2, and I will read this word for word off my project. Firstly, to understand this justification, Genesis 1:1 must be stated. I have stated Genesis 1:1.
Mm-hmm.
I'll read off maybe halfway in.
Yes, but Genesis 1:1 is just words on a page. Do you have anything that is in your palm, in the palm of your hand, that is more evidential than words on a page?
Yes, the creation of the universe. So God's non-physical, truthful lovingness involves his creation of physical energy / matter with the Bible as evidence for evidentialism / epistemic foundationalism, so that humans can cross-reference facts, as not all humans are in the direct communication with God. So to summarize that, only an ultimate, truthful, loving God can exist, and God would make his attributes known to us within the first sentence of his sacred book, the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. A creation implies love. A creation implies a non-physical God defaultly, and creation implies a truthful God, which would give us evidence of this for evidentialism. Again, all tying into Genesis 1:1, so we can focus on loving God without having to worry about which one exists. But even before reading any sacred, the way I see it, it doesn't, all conceptions of God, except an evil one, they would all be loving. So this is a way the Bible brings people closer to God. So God has made his existence explicit through general revelation and special revelation of the Bible, so we can focus on loving him directly without having to spend a lot of time figuring out which sacred book is correct. So I've made that as simple as I can.
So
can you paraphrase that?
You believe that God interacts with the universe.
I know.
You know he does. You know he interacts with the universe.
Yes.
And you know he interacts with us here on Earth.
Yes.
And with us humans.
Yes.
Because of Genesis 1.
Not just Genesis 1, but through his divine revelation to his procreated kin. So again, I will make this simple. Then you have to paraphrase.
Yeah, but I don't think so. I mean, you've made a claim that God can interact with
not.
Earth and humans, right?
It's not a claim.
Okay, where
It's the truth.
the direct evidence, for instance, that God has, Jesus has, Holy Spirit has, the devil has, any one of those four supernatural beings? Where is the evidence for them directly?
You're not addressing my argument. You're setting. I think you're setting
For
up.
supernatural. You said that he interacts with the universe. You said that he interacts with Earth and humans. Today, the way to do that is on the Google, is on YouTube.
Address Genesis 1:1.
My email to
argument.
you. But addressing your argument of Genesis 1:1, if it doesn't go beyond words on a page, there's nothing to address. I can follow the exact words that are on that page that God wrote himself, and there will be nothing. There will be no book. The exact number of words that would be on a page that Jesus wrote would be exact nothing. There would be nothing to address.
Yeah, you have to address Genesis 1:1. So to paraphrase, then you have to summarize. Only a loving, truthful God can exist.
Mm-hmm.
And God would make this known to us within the first sentence of his sacred book, the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
as creation entails an ultimate, truthful, loving God.
Okay.
So
I will repeat it back to you. I will repeat it back to you from my perspective. And then I'm not going to be condescending and ask you to repeat it back to me, but literally, there are words on a page that were orally transferred from generation to generation until it was written down somewhere around the 600 to 1200 before Common Era. And then a son came around 0, and a new version, a part 2 came, and that entity also didn't write anything down. It was human transferred through letters and stories and narratives. And not once do we really have anybody's name on it except for letters.
And there is no defeater to Genesis 1:1.
Except humans did it, not God. There's zero God there. God
created the universe, yes. God authorized the Bible. So we know even before reading the Bible that God created the universe.
Mm-hmm.
So when the Bible states, blessed are those who believe,
mm-hmm.
he's referring to those who have not read the Bible, but know that God would make the creation point known to us, not only through his revelation, but in special revelation.
Special revelation. So the claim that he interacts with the universe and he interacts with Earth and humans, well, considering what you just said, you're kind of revising it and saying special revelation is the only way to get this. And it does not say
divine and special revelation. So even before reading the Bible, we know that God exists and that he created the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And then depending on people's understanding of the Bible, that would be special revelation.
Mm-hmm.
So again, when the Bible references those who believe are blessed, though that's in regards to those who have not read the Bible. and the same applies to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Those who have not read the Bible would know that God would come down to us in a different form whilst remaining ultimate. So blessed are those who believe this without having direct contact with the Bible. So everybody knows directly or indirectly that our Judeo-Christian God exists, depending on their knowledge of the Bible. So nobody is without excuse. Satan knows that Jesus exists and that God exists, but he will be put into the lake of fire. So the distinction is not believers and non-believers. The real distinction is Judeo-Christian perfectionism and the contrary. So that supports premise 2.
So is God? Would you worship this devil that you just said? He knows God exists, but yet he's going to be thrown in the lake of fire. Would you worship this devil if I could prove the devil exists out of Genesis 1:1?
I know the devil exists.
You know the devil exists. Okay. All right. Do you have any evidence? Do you have any evidence that the devil exists?
The Bible is
Okay.
true. There's no contradictions in the Bible.
No, there's not. No, I agree. Actually, most contradictions can be written off through literary form. I mean, there's some that are there but I find most of them insignificant. The reason I am not a Christian is because God appears to be incompetent in his own book. And
it depends on what you mean by Christian, because the adjective Christian can mean a loving person. So there has to be a distinction. That's why I put forward that I am a Judeo-Christian. So it gives people clear understanding that I am referencing the Bible, because some people may self-proclaim to be Christian, but in fact they are saying that they are a loving person.
Do you think that being a Judeo-Christian, then that Satan is in the Garden of Eden?
In regards to the snake,
the crafty serpent in Genesis 3:1, yeah.
I haven't looked into it much.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not my argument. So Genesis 1:1 is still outstanding against you.
Well, Genesis 1:1 is a, as I have stated previously, that it was not written by God. It was written by man.
God authorized the authors to write down their experiences as God had.
Is there anything that God could authorize today? Like his own YouTube channel? His own Google? God's
address my argument first before.
Yeah, it's literary. It's pages of words that God neither wrote or
God authorized. So he gave approval to the authors to write down their experiences.
I disagree with that. I don't think there's a single author in the Gospels or the letters that actually write down their experience with Jesus and state their name to it.
I reference Genesis 1:1.
Well, you're Judeo-Christian, so that means you follow the New Testament. So it wasn't anybody in the New Testament times who wrote Genesis 1:1.
My argument still remains outstanding.
Well, so does mine. You don't have words on a page written by Jesus himself. You don't have words on a page written by God himself. Let me ask you this.
God authorize. So God doesn't.
Yeah, well, I don't believe
God
you.
doesn't
You don't have any, you just have a claim to that.
You have to. You have to.
I have to? Okay. Well,
because
I reject your truth for my truth then. I think you're
because you can't provide a sacred book superseding the Bible. This is why I stated
the Epic of Gilgamesh isn't a sacred book that precedes the Bible.
What's the first sentence of that?
It was written by men as well, maybe even women. And it predates the Bible by quite a few. Syrian tablets, Babylonian tablets have thousands of years predating.
Well, that's a claim because
you can go look it up. You can go to a museum and see them.
You would have to appeal to science to come to the dating of that. So it doesn't matter exact date of the publication of the Bible. So God authorized the authors to write down their experiences. As God had communication with Moses, Moses was the author of Genesis.
So we had Genesis 1:1 in the Garden of Eden.
No, not the Bible.
Okay.
Not the Old Testament.
Then there's no authorization there. That is a fake. That is a fake reference.
Had communication with Moses.
Oh, with Moses, and so Moses wrote it.
Yes, Moses wrote Genesis 1:1.
And if Moses didn't exist,
you're not addressing my argument.
Well, yeah, Moses possibly didn't exist. That's a true statement.
That's just a claim.
Well, I believe it's a literary probability that there is somebody who may have been named Moses, and the stories were legendary development, much like your God, much like Jesus.
Genesis 1:1 is true, entailing the remaining Bible to be true for the aforestated reasons.
Yeah, could be. It could be true. I'll give you that. You put your percentage at 100%. I put your percentage at 0.00000 something. But authorization aside, do we have
Hang on, you made a
stone tablet?
You made a claim. So again, God is ultimate truthful love. Thus, he would make that known to us within the first sentence of his sacred book, the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Okay.
Okay, so the conclusion follows.
Do you have a selfie of God loving you? I don't.
Okay, so hang on. The conclusion follows. Judeo-Christian / biblical presuppositionalism follows. Affirming the law of rational inference.
Do we have something in nature that right now we could go to and said, God grew this from a seed and it says his word on it? Just like creation.
Agree to the argument. Agree to the syllogism.
The syllogism? No, you're reading pages. You're reading words on a page that weren't written by God. And if they were authorized by God, you don't have any evidence of that authorization. And I think you should.
I already have. I've already stated that God is ultimate truthful love.
It's just not true. Like,
it is true because God is ultimate truthful love. And he would make this known to us within the first sentence of the Bible. So that it doesn't mean God doesn't have to write it down himself. He gave authorization for somebody else to write it, as that's part of his plan. So obviously there's a reason why humans had to write down themselves entries for the Bible. So that's all part of God's plan.
Is God competent enough to interact with a holy book such as the Bible?
Agree to the argument / syllogism first?
Yeah, I don't think so.
You have
it's
to.
Literary.
Because
It's
God
literary. If God is
doesn't
love,
matter
if
because
God
it
is love and he's able
because
to
it
create
conf-
something in nature, then he's able to create his own book. And he doesn't. He uses humans. He uses
God
the
authorized.
authorization, quote unquote, whatever that
There
is.
it's part of his plan. It's part of his plan. God could have written himself all the entries for the Bible,
He could have.
but
Did he?
obviously there is a reason.
Mm.
There is a reason to bring people closer to him through man. So you just have to accept that. Because if God were to write down every entry of his sacred book, he would make this known to us verbally, some sort of explicit form. That hasn't happened. So this is why we have to take the Bible for what it is, that man authored entries for it. So you have to agree to the argument / syllogism before asking irrelevant questions.
So where do you extract this love in Genesis 1:1?
Agree to the arguments before asking questions, unless you're asking clarifying questions to definitions that I have.
Your definition of Genesis 1:1 is to demonstrate that this love exists, and that's why Genesis 1:1 exists, yes? Like,
I've already stated this, so you have to summarize now. God is love, and he would make this known to us within Genesis 1:1.
okay.
As creation is an expression of love.
Okay.
God is ultimate truthful love, entailing his authorization of the Bible for evidentialism / epistemic foundationalism, so that fallen creatures can cross-reference facts, as not all humans defaultly are in the absolute presence of God. So we have to appeal to the Bible, as I would say, a second authority to cross-reference facts. So can you summarize that?
If the Bible is deception, then everything you said is deception. And that is what I'm going to affirm. Your book says
just a
something.
Hypothetical.
Okay. Is deception in the Bible?
There is.
Yeah, it's on page 3.
The Bible.
It's on page 3. It starts on page 3, right? Deception occurs on the Bible.
I'm referencing the first sentence.
So the first sentence, yes, it doesn't say love. It just says creation.
It implies love.
You're placing
creation.
an ad.
It implies love, the entailment of creation, as God is love. 1 John 4:8, entailing the verb love of creation, as physicalities involve water, electricity, oxygen, etc. So God has given this to us for humans to sustain their dualism, and God would make this known to us not only through his divine revelation, but his special revelation of the Bible.
There you go.
/ biblicalism, from Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 to Revelation chapter 22 verse 21. Again, for evidentialism / epistemic foundationalism. On the contrary, if God authorized another sacred book, then that contradicts his perfectness / infallibleness, as God doesn't make mistakes. So the Quran, for example, is not an addition to the Bible, because the Quran would state this in the first sentence to avoid confusion. The New Testament complements the Old Testament because it's part of the Bible. So we have to appeal to the Bible for what it is today, not how it was in the past, because God would make sure of the longevity of the Bible throughout history. So conditionally, if God authorized the Bible, then his ultimate truthful lovingness would source the first sentence of the Bible. God's ultimate truthful lovingness does source the first sentence of the Bible per his sacred theology / divine revelation to his procreated kinfolk. Therefore, God's biblical authorization follows. If you dispute that with why didn't God write the Bible himself, well, that would go against his plan of salvation, because overall, I would say the reasons why he does what he does here on earth is to bring as much people as close to as possible to him. So he had to do that through man. And it gave a reason for God to interact with humans throughout the times. So that's more reason why God allowed humans to author the Bible, as opposed to him just writing it out himself. As I did state earlier, if God can write the Bible out himself, then he could just say out loud in words to everybody. But that may not be the best plan of action to bring as many people closer to him. So he had to use man to accomplish his goals. So can you summarize all of that? If you
not really. I mean,
present,
it's a mute point, because you're stating that Genesis 1:1 shows that your God is loving by creating. Now, I have a problem with that, because God didn't write Genesis 1:1, and you're assuming that God said it and it was written down, and therefore I should believe it. Well, humans wrote it. Humans were the ones who wrote this. Humans passed it down from generation to generation for
a reason
nearly 2 millennia before it was written down.
I gave the reason why God used humans to author the Bible, because if God authorized, so I'm paraphrasing what I said, if God authored the Bible himself, then it may not bring people as close as possible to him. And if God spoke the Bible to us, as opposed to reading it through a book, then that may not bring what he wants out of people. So he used man to accomplish his goals. And this gives God a reason to interact with people during the times of the publications of the Bible entries. So to summarize that, God allowed humans to author the Bible because it brings humans closer to him.
So, Bob, one of my friends in the chat, has brought up that you've asked for a text that predates this. And this is the
I didn't ask
Enuma Elise.
I said it doesn't matter. I said it doesn't matter the date of when, to paraphrase what I said, it doesn't matter the date of when the Bible was published. because I'm basing my argument on the first sentence of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
If you're referencing the website you've got there, that would have to appeal to extra biblical material, e.g., a scientific method to come to the understanding of the dates. So you can, all these claims that there are books that predate the Bible are not arguments.
Yes, they are. It's an argument that your book,
and it's the genetic fallacy. Because you have to,
dude, you know what? You have called out I could have called you out for about 35, 40 fallacies today. Have I told you fallacy once?
I haven't made any fallacies.
Oh, you know, I was born at night, but it wasn't last night. Ultimated. Seriously, you have a book that wasn't written by God, but you demand that I accept it as it were. It was written by humans. This is another document that's written by humans, and see how easily. No, please let me finish. Please let me finish.
I've already.
So you have, in the subject matter, you have stated emphatically that your book is written by your God and authorized by your God. It wasn't written by your God. You have no evidence for the authorization of such. So if you're going to claim that this book somehow doesn't qualify for the kind of the parameters that you've set it for, then it's disingenuous. All right, I'm unmuted you.
Hang on, don't mute me. I've already addressed. This is maybe the third. I've been muted again, I think.
No.
I've already addressed this. This is maybe the fourth time now. You can't use this as an argument. Why didn't God offer the Bible? Why didn't God write down the Bible himself?
Yeah.
I've already addressed this because it's not part of his plan.
Oh.
Bring as many people close to possible, because he gave permission for humans to author the Bible because it brings people closer to God.
You know whose plan it sounds like to not have written down your own informations where the clarity and gravitas is repeatable and testable, and everyone can be on the same page instead of a multitude of denominations? You know who would probably do that? The deceiver. The deceiver in the story. The satanic figure in the story. That is probably the person that would hide behind, I'm not going to write this. I'm going to let humans write it. I'm going to authorize it for myself and do it, but I'm not going to put any kind of updates. I'm not going to make the Bible a verb like it is, like Google is. I'm not going to present myself on a YouTube channel because every single person in the known universe that I know of is now able to either watch my channel or make a channel of their own. And God somehow is completely incapable of doing it because plan.
Address the argument.
The argument is you've asked for another document that does it. I've provided you with another document and you've immediately rejected it. Now, why are you rejecting it?
I said it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It matters equally to the document that you are referring to in Genesis 1:1. They're human writings about a story of a God.
It doesn't
God didn't write. God didn't write this.
I've already addressed this. Is maybe the fifth time now. It doesn't matter that God didn't write the Bible himself. Because it's not part of his plan.
I understand that, but
God,
you know,
this is a way God is a personal being, so he would give people purpose. More precisely, the authors of the Bible entangling others to feel connected to God, as God spoke to many people throughout the Bible. Again, bringing people closer to him. So we gave people purpose.
I think we'll leave it there. Ultimated. It's been an interesting conversation. You know, I don't agree with premise 1, and I don't agree with premise 2.
We moved to premise 2, so you had to have agreed to premise 1 if we are on premise 2 for this long.
Yeah, you have a presupposition. That doesn't mean that you weren't deceived by presupposing something. And I think you've been deceived.
Hang on, yeah, that's you're possibly appealing to Cartesian's demon. That's fallacious.
Never heard of it, but thanks for the evidence. Cartesian's demon. How do you spell that? With a K or C?
C.
Cartesian's demon. Oh my goodness. Never heard of it.
More powerful.
Is that in the Bible? Cartesian's demon is in the Bible?
Cartesians, mate, I don't know, but I would say it's. I think it's from a philosophy encyclopedia.
Well, if deception is on page 3 of your holy book that was supposedly authorized by God, it's a perfect paradise in which that deception occurs in. That's God's controlled environment. And you would have to explain away that God himself didn't authorize deception from starting in the first place, which makes God, essentially.
That contradicts his nature. I said over and over again, God is ultimate truthful love.
Perfect. If he's ultimate truthful love, then he's ultimate truthful deception. And that's exactly what happens.
That's the fallacy of Cartesian's demon. So to elaborate on this,
never heard of Cartesian's demon, but the Bible does say.
I will explain it. Even if a powerful demon was to give off revelation of God, that demon would still be subject to the revelation of God. So a demon can't be eternal. Thus, God is the stipulator for his own revelation, not a demon. So God is ultimate truthful love. So he wouldn't start off with deception. That's the fallacy. And this is quite a lengthy word. I have to look it up again. Just a moment.
So I just feel like we're going to go around in circles because I believe words on a page do not constitute a God, and you do.
Hang on, now you're jumping to premise 2.
That's because premise 1, God is not an ultimate brute fact.
So God is not agath hierarchological or omnimalevolent. So agath
he's not
hierarchological.
What?
So that means God is not both evil and good.
Well, then he's evil.
And he is no.
If evil exists in his controlled environment, then he is evil.
God is not omnimalevolent, or in other words, infinitely evil, because God is self-loving for being ultimate perfection. So he positively pleasures himself entailing love towards his procreated kin. So
is that how he interacts in the universe?
Yes, God has revealed himself. He has created the universe, as stated earlier.
So did you just say God pleasures himself through the love of his creation, and he interacts with the universe? It sounds very sexual to me.
That's the entailment. God is positively pleasuring himself.
Oh my goodness!
Creation.
Hey, this is a PG-13. Get that smut off of here.
Positively. So that doesn't. It's not just sexual pleasure. He positively pleasures himself, entailing benevolence to his procreated kinfolk.
Yeah.
Which he has made known to us through the creation of the universe. This all supports premise 2 of my argument. This is why I am very on point when I say, if you want to move on to premise 2, you have to accept premise 1, because often people will flip-flop from premise 2 to premise 1, then premise 1 to premise 2.
Yeah, but I rejected it.
You just referenced it with the pronoun I. We wouldn't be.
That
We
doesn't
wouldn't
mean
be.
anything if
We
you
we
don't
wouldn't.
prove in the
We
first
wouldn't.
place that there's
We
a God for there to
we
be an
wouldn't.
I of.
We
It's
wouldn't be. We wouldn't have been on premise 2 for so long if
oh
you
my
haven't
goodness.
agreed to premise 1.
Ultimated, I have given you all the rope you want, and I think right now the way you're repeating yourself, I think you're hanging yourself with it. I really
I'm
do.
not.
Okay.
I'm stating we wouldn't have been on premise 2 for so long if you haven't agreed to premise 1.
Well, I didn't agree
I
to premise 1 or 2.
assumed I assumed you agreed to premise 1. That's why I moved on to premise 2, and I even went as far as to reference my project supporting premise 2.
Mhm.
So if you weren't in agreement to premise 1, then I would assumed you would have stopped me proving the Bible. You didn't for so long. So now, because you haven't got a defeater to premise 2, you're backtracking or doubling down to premise 1. This is why I've stated you have to accept premise 1 before moving on to premise 2. So the pronoun I presupposes God, aka premise 1, thus premise 2 follows.
Well, let's start
And
this
this
over again. I mean, you're stating the same thing that I rejected when I said I am an atheist. That doesn't assume that God's in the eye.
Yes, because not only is God in the I, the pronoun, but in the term atheism, because atheism references God. Atheism is
Uh,
completely a subjective claim, an arbitrary label, because
uh-huh.
God is ultimate truthful love. And
Actually,
because
I
God,
agree with you up to the point where you said ultimate truthful love. There's no premise for ultimate truthful love in anything you've demonstrated today.
yes, by definition, God
But
definitionally is ultimate truthful love, as he is ultimate perfection, entailing positive self
and
pleasure.
we're repeating ourselves. My question to you was
I'm paraphrasing
when
myself.
I went and searched to read to you gravitas, and you said, "Well, I looked it up." So anything that is defined as you are stating, there is no equivalent to the verb Google for God. Zero.
Agree to the argument. Agree. That's premise 1. God, by definition, is ultimate truthful love. Parenthetically, backing sacred theologies forward slash
Where
field
did you get that?
theology
Where
through God's special and general revelation of himself.
to who?
It's to all of us.
To all of us.
God has revealed himself to everybody,
Uh-huh.
so that no one is without excuse coming judgment day.
Did
That refutes
God reveal
agnosticism.
to everyone to be warned of deception?
Agree to the argument before asking questions that are not clarifying questions to definitions to my argument, unless otherwise you have to present a defeater. If you can't present a defeater, then you have to accept my earlier point.
Okay, your point is as soon as I say I, that assumes a God. I reject that.
It references a God because
Yeah.
you are a finite being. So for you to understand that you have limitations, your self-consciousness at a beginning, you have to
Mhm.
reference God to understand that fact, supporting God's prescriptive laws of logics forward slash thought, again supporting the true ontological dichotomous creator-creature distinction. The only two things that can exist is God and temporalities. Because you are a temporality, you are subject to God. If you
So
assert a trichotomy ontologically, then you would have to assert conceptually absolute nothingness. Absolute nothingness by definition is impossible because things exist and stuff cannot causelessly spawn from absolute nothingness or facts because the brute contingency of instant actualization, considering beings are irreducibly complex,
wouldn't it
e.g.,
be wouldn't it be just easier to provide evidence that God exists and he wrote something?
God, the invisible.
I mean, we wouldn't have to spend an hour and a
invisible-
half talking about nothing if that were the case.
The invisible attributes of God is the evidence of Him.
Yes, but is there anything in nature that you can point to that says God is doing this right now and he's providing his authorized word? Is there a plant out there right now we can pluck the leaf off and it says God's word on it?
God grounds all physical facts because to identify physicalities, we have to reference a non-physical God. So the evidence
and you don't see any
God
fallacies. You don't see any fallacies in that claim right there.
It's not a claim. That's a loaded question.
It's not a question. It's a fact. That's a brute fact.
It's a load. No, only because God is a brute fact definitionally.
So where do you get that God is a brute fact other than the writings? I mean, you have writings that you're relying on through Genesis 1:1. Those writings didn't come from God. They came from quote unquote authorization.
Divine revelation. So we know God.
Divine revelation. So only special people who talk to God. Paranoid schizophrenics, for instance.
Not just through verbal speaking. God has made himself known through his invisible attributes.
Yeah.
So we know he exists without people having to hear his voice. So you've asked for the evidence of God. My response to that is his invisible attributes. And then I think you double down to physicalities. And my response to that is God grounds all physical facts, because to identify physicalities, we reference a non-physical / immaterial God. So this all supports sacred / revealed theologies, i.e., divine, general, and natural revelation of the creator-creature distinction, perfect being theology, God's ultimate / brute factness, and God's prescriptive laws of logic / thought. And then premise 2 is true for the aforestated reasons. You said okay to premise 2. That's why I went to the conclusion.
Ultimated. Let me get a clarification. Did I say, oh, okay, or did I say, okay? Like.
You said okay, and then I said,
let's go back to the tape. Let's go find this. Let's go find where I said okay. Let's go find it, because this is.
And then when I went to say, to paraphrase, that the conclusion follows from the premises, then you went back to premise 1. So the formation of the syllogism / prologism, if P1 is part
just
of
cut to the
P2,
crap. You ultimated. Stop reading whatever it is that you're reading. Just answer the question. No. Just stop reading whatever it is that you're reading. I don't need to hear it again. I just don't need to hear it again. You have a situation where you are making a claim that in the first premise it's a brute fact, and just the word I is somehow, and I've never agreed to that. Never.
Hang on. We were on premise 2, so I assume you agreed to it. It's all on recording, and then you said okay.
Yeah, let's go back. Let's find it. Do you remember? Do you remember where? I can't pull up a transcript here.
If P1 is part of P2 and P2 is part of C, then C follows.
Oh, shut up! That is ridiculous. Whatever that means, that's ridiculous. That proves God about as much as shit on my shoe.
You can look it up. If P1 is part of P2 and P2 is part of C, then C follows. That's very, basic. So if A is part of B and B is part of C, then C is true.
Yeah, you're talking nonsense, Automated.
I'm not.
I'm not even listening to you. I'm not even listening to you.
You just, for you to say something is nonsense, you reference our Judeo-Christian God supporting the ultimative to ultimate categorical syllogism. Don't take it personal. This is the truth of one by default. So this is an ultimative to ultimate categorical syllogism for Judeo-Christian / biblical presuppositionalism.
And that's it. I give you the last word. Ultimated, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. I think we've had a productive discussion, even though we didn't really get into an agreement. All right. Well, that was interesting. I learned a lot, or I learned a little. And presuppositionalism. It's just a foundationless claim, in my opinion. So I thank you, Ultimated Judeo-Christian, for coming on, and going to give you the outro. Great night. See you around the webs.